For this week's assignment, like I've talked about in class today, we're going to do a bottle label recreation, which is a pretty common thing that you might be asked to do in a design job where you're handed something and asked to recreate it from scratch because the original files have either been deleted or were not saved from the former designer who created it in the first place. So if you go under the assignment on our page, you'll see the instructions for the assignment as well as the how to submit it and what you're submitting. First things first, right? We want to make sure that we are setting up our file in Adobe Illustrator. We're going to use Adobe Illustrator for this assignment, not Photoshop. So you can see that document setup for this. If you scroll down, you'll see the photo I have taken for you. I've scanned in of 2 different labels. You're going to choose one of them. Remember, you're going to only choose one of them. And setting up that file in Illustrator is going to be based off of that size dimensions that's on that picture there. So you can see the width is going to be 9.25 inches. The height is going to be 3.75 inches. So in Illustrator, I'm going to click on New. I'm going to make sure that lines up. So remember, our width is 9.25. And then height is going to be 3.75. And we want to make sure, of course, that that's always in inches, not pixels or any other unit of increment. We can see that that's the orientation of horizontal / landscape, so that is correct. And then from there, we just want to make sure that CMYK is chosen as well. For our color modes, since it is a printed out type thing, right? It is something that we would use for a print product and not on screen, since this would be affixed to a bottle. So CMYK is our color mode for anything that is printed. And then specifically, you can see that I've also mentioned you want to make sure that this is set up with a resolution, or PPI, pixels per inch, of 300, which is a high resolution. After that, we can click Create. You'll see our canvas is going to look similar to what we've got going on here for our scan. The next big thing that I would recommend is going ahead and right-clicking on that image and saving image as, so you can have that copy to use. We're going to use that as a template. I've already downloaded my copy here. And so to be able to place our template picture in, we're going to go to the top menu of File, and then we're going to go down to find Place. And we can do place, choose that image that we've got for our template, and then place it in. You can see that when I place something with Illustrator, right, my mouse kind of turns into a preview of this image, so I can click and drag out from here down. And that might be a little too small, so we might need to possibly size it up. I'm going to hold spacebar to pan over for a sec. But the problem, of course, is our picture here. We need to line up inside so we can see that, for instance, as an example, using my selection tool, I'm going to make my screen bigger. We can see that the selection tool is chosen. We can see that our label, of course, is not filling out the entire space. Right? So we need to, of course, size it up. Remember that anytime we size in Illustrator, we don't just click and drag here because that squishes and stretches. We want to hold Shift with our left finger and then be able to size it up to be able to fit. So we're going to try to line that up. I'm going to use the yellow one or orange one. We can do either one. You are free to choose whichever one you wish to do. Couple notes, especially for the yellow or orange one, if you choose to do that one. Cool, awesome. Obviously, this is supposed to be filled in with that color. It's ripped off of the bottle, so you need to make sure that, of course, is filled in for that shape. But you want to make sure that it's lined up. Whatever one you choose to do, it is fitting inside of the black bounding area of our canvas. Right now, right, if we were to go look for a quick sec, you can see we've got layer 1 in my layers panel. So we want to call this template. So I'm going to double click and change that to template. I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to lock it because I don't want this to move around, right? I'm going to make 3 new layers. And this is the way that I work. You can do more layers if you feel like you need it. I'm going to do 3 and I'll tell you why. So we've got layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, right? So layer 2 is going to be my left side. The middle is going to be layer 3, and then the right side is going to be layer 4. So I'm breaking this label up into 3 different sections, right? And I want to make sure that since there's a lot of stuff going on here that I need to recreate, that I've got everything kind of sectioned off into its own label, right? So on the left side over here, I would only work on everything that is here over. In the middle, same thing. I would cut it off pretty much from where this glass of vitamin water is over until you get right up to the nutrition facts label. And then the nutrition facts label, the ingredients, all of this stuff is going to be on the right side. So when we think about it, when we're recreating a label, everything that's on this label is something that you can create easily from within Illustrator. So everything you create needs to be vector in its respect, right? You're not including any pictures. You're not including any logos of pictures that you found, right? You're creating everything from scratch. And what I want you to see as we zoom in with Control plus or Command plus, right, is all of this pretty much, if we think about it, is just text, some basic shapes. Maybe possibly you have to draw a unique shape that you might have to draw, like this little inside of this circular for potassium. Maybe possibly you have to draw something that's like the recycle logo. But realistically, everything is pretty much text and or basic shapes, right? The green box that's at the top of this is just straight up a green rectangle that we draw at the top, right? The black box is just straight across at the bottom. So you're drawing and or creating everything from scratch using pretty much the type tool, right? Just the regular type tool. And any of the shape tools. Most likely you're going to stick with mostly the rectangle tool. Remember that you can alter and you can change things, you can draw things with the pen tool. So if there is something unique that you want to draw that's more specific, like for instance these rounded kind of rectangles that only have the rounded bits at the top and bottom, that's perfectly fine. One of the things that you're going to see really quickly, right, is as you go, so I'm going to start on the left side as an example. For this kind of small quote right here, if it's not quite reality star, it says something self-aware, level of refreshing, but with 3 key electrolytes, it's pretty gosh darn refreshing. I'm going to draw a text box with my type tool to try to fit within this area. And I'm going to need to make sure that it is sized correctly, that it's spaced correctly. Maybe for you right now, the easiest way to be able to see everything, right? Remember that text is filled with a fill color, is to change it to a bright hot neon pink or something that's really easily seen, right? But you're going to want to type everything that's there. So you can do that on top, or you can move this over and then move it and then space it. So I'm going to do it's not quite reality star says space something self-aware level of let's see, spacebar refreshing, but with 3 key spacebar electrolytes. It's pretty gosh darn refreshing. Actually, pretty gosh spacebar darn refreshing. So you can see a couple things that's happening, right? So obviously as I've typed in everything, more text is outside of my bounding box. So needless to say, I'm going to need to open my bounding box as well as be able to shrink it smaller or bigger depending on kind of how you've typed it up. So I did spacebar obviously so that it spaces, or I did return every time that I needed to do something where it drops down one line, right? That being said, this is still too wide, right? We can see that if we think back to typography 1, when we're dealing with spacing in between lines, we're dealing with leading, right? So the leading of this text is way too big for what I've created. So in our Illustrator panels over here, remember we always want to work with the workspace of Essentials Classic so that all of this looks familiar. So under the properties panel, we can see character, and then we can see, of course, the type of font that's used, the style of font, the size of the font, the leading for the font. So right now you can see the size of the font is at 12, the leading is at 14.4. So I can decrease the size of my text. I want to match up the style of font, which means that I need to go look for the font that is going to be similar to it. You can see certain aspects that are going to be different, right? So you can look at individual letters, you can look at individual characters and see like, does that look the same? But for spacing, right, if I need to increase or decrease the leading, right, we click on that for the leading, that space that's vertical right there, and we can increase or decrease, and that's going to increase or decrease our leading, right? So we can get it to line up closer. So if it's somewhere in between, let's say for instance 12 and 13, I can easily type in 12.5, and that's going to be something a little closer, maybe possibly 12.75. Right, and that'll be closer. If you're still looking at these and you're trying to change the font, and you're like, all right, cool, what is this font most likely gonna be? Right, we can go through and try to figure out kind of what is this font. My recommendation is usually always to be over top of it, but also to try to figure out, cool, what does this look like? So as an example, I've gone over to Arial. This is a pretty simple, straightforward font. We can line it up and see if it kind of matches, right? We might need to shrink it down a little bit more. And then in regards to squishing, right, we've already talked about squishing vertically with leading. Think back to typography again, and if we need to space out the holistic thing, right, the holistic block of text, then we're realistically dealing with tracking, right? So tracking is going to be that space in between letters as a whole. So if we have multiple words, multiple letters, and we're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, this is going to be the key of trying to play with that. Remember that we can individually choose lines, and then we can also play with the tracking for just one line, right? So it's possible that one line is going to be different than the others, right? Which means that it's been tracked semi-differently. So I might need to go in and track individual words and individual letters. So we might want to shrink this so we can get it here and try to get it to line up, right? It's going to be a balancing act, a back and forth of trying to figure out kind of what works, what needs to be fit. You are solving the problem of trying to figure out and how to recreate something that is completely from scratch, right? You've been given this thing that exists already, that was clearly designed, and this is something that's just, it's realistic, that's possible that you might have to deal with. My recommendation as you work in those 3 layers is to work from the ground up. So for instance, as an example, what I should probably do, if I have something that goes across all 3 layers, right? Let's say for instance, across all 3 of these, so the black square or black rectangle and the green rectangle, I might want to make another layer that's going to be underneath of all of those sides and call it, background or base or something along that line, base rectangles. And then using the shape tool for the rectangle, I can draw my black rectangle to fit within that box, right? So if I change the color, boom, we've got that. Same deal if we wanted to make a copy, we could hold down Alt or Option, make a copy, and then shrink this up to fit the green. To get that color, right, to get that exact color of green, my recommendation, use the eyedropper tool to click on that green, and that's going to fill in that green with you, and then you can size it to fit up against each other, right? So if we were to turn off our template layer, we would see the foundation so far of my black and green boxes for the backgrounds. I typically recommend, if you need to turn it off, you're going to be turning it off and on while you're working. That's good, right? But if you ever need to change the visibility of any layer at all, right, I can double click on a layer and I can dim the images. I'm basically dimming it down, so it's only going to be 50% transparent, right? Or if I need to do it more, I can dim it even more. So if I need to dim it, I can dim that. My recommendation personally is usually just to hide it and show it when you need to see it. But you should be checking to try to figure out like what's working, what's not working. And just remember at the end, right, all of this text that you change maybe to an awkward color, so I chose pink, should be actually the color that is on the label, right? So this text needs to be white, so it should be white. So please make sure that when you submit the final file, it looks as if it belongs as the original file, right? It's the original label that was created. So make sure that those colors are there. I say that just to make sure that you don't wind up with pink text when there was not supposed to be pink text, right? You were creating something that is supposed to be printed and then produced and put out on a label, so it should look as if it was print ready, right? So jumping a little bit ahead, after you go through and you design everything and you have it looking as if it's this exact label, right? You're going to need to hide the template layer, have only your stuff visible, right, with all the eyeballs. And then you're going to file save. You're going to make sure that you save, of course, as your Illustrator file, right? You're also going to save out as a PDF. And I want you to see specifically how you do that correctly, right? Your AI file is great. That's your working file. But you need to save a PDF for print-worthy production. So let's take a look at that. We're going to save as. When I'm here, I'm going to save on my computer, right? And then from here, I'm going to change Illustrator to PDF, so Adobe PDF. Make sure that, again, it's always your first initial, your last name, the project name, so bottle recreation. So NGO bottle recreation. And then we can do save. And so you're going to get this menu for saving as a PDF. The big thing that I want you to see is that you should have, when you click on the Adobe PDF preset button, a high quality print chosen. Okay, high quality print chosen. And then if you click under marks and bleeds, we're going to click for all printers marks. All printers marks. That's going to give us trim marks so that we can trim it out. That's going to give us registration marks to make sure that everything is registered for the printer itself. That's going to give us color bars to make sure that the colors that are going to work. And then any page information such as the size of the file, the name of the file, any of that jazz is all going to be included. So all printers marks. When we save a PDF of that, I want you to see what that looks like. So if we go and look, I should have that right here. So NGO bottle recreation PDF. When I open it, right, you saw this for last semester for one of our projects, right, for our book cover or book jacket design. This is the way it should look for your PDF. If you don't have all of these markings, then you do not have it set up correctly. So please make sure that you've got those chosen. Obviously with all of the information and everything you've recreated on the label. But this is your next project, and I'm excited to see you go through the process, and I'm glad to help you along the process. It is a tedious project, so please make sure that you are taking your time with it and trying to figure out how to get everything to line up. Don't wait till the last minute. It's not something that can be slapped together instantly. But outside of that, good luck, and I will see you next week / this week. Thank y'all.